Welcome to Adult Sleep Stories, where your day ends and your dreams begin. Tonight, let go of the noise, slow your breath, and follow the sound of my voice into a world beyond the ordinary. This is your time to unwind, drift deeply, and dream wildly. Let's begin. Tonight's story is The Summer He Was Real. Take a deep breath. Let the weight of the day fall away. Feel your shoulders soften, your jaw unclench, and your heartbeat slow. You're standing at the edge of a still lake. The air is warm. The stars are beginning to wake. With each breath, you're stepping closer to a moment long ago. A summer that changed everything. Let the world hush around you. You are exactly where you're meant to be. Every summer, the lake remembers me. It greets me with the same cool hush when I step off the wooden dock, barefoot and sun-drowsy, the same sharp scent of pine needles and gasoline from an old boat engine, the same crickets singing their never-ending song from the cattails. Here, time thickens. Hours stretch out like warm honey on toast. My phone barely gets reception. My hair smells like firewood and lilacs. And I become a quieter version of myself, softer, slower, almost someone else entirely. The house hasn't changed. It never does. Peeling white shutters, a porch swing that moans in protest. The same hand-painted sign above the kitchen door that says, "Come as you are." I always do. No makeup, no shoes, no expectations. Just me and the dream. It started when I was 16. Every summer, as soon as I fell asleep in the old upstairs bedroom with the warped windows and the faded lilac sheets, he would come to me. A man I'd never met, tall, bare-chested, laughing, always just out of reach. We never spoke, we never touched, but he felt real, like memory, like something I should have known but somehow forgot. He stood by the docks some nights, fireflies gathering around him like a halo. Other times he'd walk the edge of the water at dawn, head turned away, waiting for me to call out. I never did. I couldn't. There was always this thick, humming feeling in my throat. Want, maybe, or fear. I tried to tell my mother once. I was 17 and drunk on peach schnapps, breathless from running through the woods, convinced I'd seen him in the waking world. She just smiled the way mothers do when they want you to believe your life will be more simple than theirs. "You're just feeling everything too much," she said, brushing sand off my shoulder. "That's what being young is." But I wasn't young anymore. 29 now. A lifetime wedged between who I was then and who I was pretending to be now. Still, the dream came back every June like clockwork. Except this summer, it didn't wait for sleep. It started with a shadow, long, lean, passing behind the birch trees on the first morning I arrived. I was standing at the sink, rinsing coffee grounds, the back door open to the breeze. For a moment, I swore I saw someone walking along the lake's edge. Shirtless, familiar, Then he was gone. I stood frozen, hands wet and trembling. I didn't go outside, not right away, just pressed my palms to the cool farmhouse porcelain and told myself it was nothing. A trick of light, a wandering hiker, a ghost from my own relentless memory. But that night, I didn't dream, and the silence inside sleep was louder than it had ever been. It was the third night. I was rambling about the way the light caught the tops of the trees when I saw him. Not in a dream, not in the soft corners of my memory. He was standing at the end of the dock, like he belonged there, like he'd always been there. Barefoot, shirt open, hair damp like he'd just come out of the lake. He turned his head slowly when he heard me step onto the dock. And the second his eyes met mine, I forgot how to breathe. Because it was him, the dream. I had just come back from a long walk around the far side of the lake, where the trail curves past the mossy oaks and the deer like to bed down in the tall grass. Dusk was slipping into night. The sky was bruised pink and lavender, and the scent of honeysuckle thickened the air like perfume. I had taken to talking to myself out loud on those walks, maybe out of loneliness, maybe out of habit. Maybe I liked the sound of my own voice in a place where no one else could hear it. The man I had imagined for 13 summers was now standing less than 20 feet away, real as the wind on my skin. And his smile, God, his smile, it hit me like a sun-warmed wave. I was wondering when you'd come back, he said. His voice was exactly how I imagined, low, rumbled, like a secret or a storm rolling in. I opened my mouth, but no words came, only air, shaky, stunned air. You, I whispered. You're not real. He tilted his head. Aren't I? I walked toward him, slowly, afraid if I moved too fast, he'd vanish, like he always did. But he didn't. The dock creaked beneath my feet. The water lapped gently against the wooden posts. The last of the light shimmered on the lake's surface like spilled gold. When I reached him, I stopped, inches away, close enough to smell him, like cedar smoke and lake water, and something faintly electric, like ozone before rain. I've seen you, I said, every summer in my dreams. His eyes searched mine, green, deep, sad in a way that felt familiar. I know, he said quietly. I've been waiting for you to wake up. And then, without touching me, he made me feel like I'd been kissed. It wasn't lust, not yet. It was recognition. That soul-deep ache that says, I know you, even when you shouldn't. It made my skin hum, my throat tighten. You don't understand, I whispered. You don't need to, he said. Just stay with me tonight. One night, that's what his voice promised. Not forever, not even till morning. Just the sliver of time. A single, perfect breath in the universe. I said yes, not aloud, not even with a nod. I just stepped forward into the heat of his body and let my hand slide over his chest, real and solid, warm. He closed his eyes, exhaled like he's been holding his breath for years. The dock, The lake, the stars, they all fell away. All that was left was the feeling of finding something I didn't know I'd lost. Something that felt like home. He kissed me like a man who'd been dying of thirst. No hesitation, no small talk, just his mouth on mine, warm and sure, like he already knew every part of me, like he'd studied my lips in 100 dreams, and finally, he got to taste them. I gasped into him, and he caught the sound like a secret in the back of his throat. His hands, God, his hands. They weren't tentative. They didn't ask permission. They knew. They remembered. Fingers sliding through my hair, down the curve of my back, pulling me closer, anchoring me to something I didn't understand, but I didn't want to question. The dock was still beneath us, but barely. The night air curled around our skin, warm with summer and wild with tension. The lake shimmered just beyond, a mirror to the moon. Fireflies blinked in the trees like a living constellation. I need to know you're real, I whispered against his lips. He answered by lifting me, effortlessly, like I weighed nothing, and carrying me into the house, into the familiar hush of the cabin that suddenly felt like another world. Inside, nothing has changed, but everything had. He set me down in front of the fireplace. It hasn't been lit in years, but the heat between us didn't need flame. He touched my face like he was memorizing me, like I was both discovery and certainty. I undid the buttons of my dress slowly, letting the cotton slip from my shoulders and pool at my feet. His eyes darkened. He didn't move, he just stared, reverent, hungry. I stepped toward him, bare and heart racing. He ran his thumb down the line of my collarbone, then lower. His touch was light and teasing, a painter's brush, a promise. "You're beautiful," he murmured. "I've waited so long for you," I said, breath hitching. "I know," he said. "Me too." Then we stopped talking. His mouth found the curve of my neck, and the hollow of my shoulder, and the swell of my breast. Every kiss was a spark, every touch a flame. He laid me down on a rug in front of the cold fireplace like I was something sacred. And then we burned, slowly, deeply, like it mattered. There was nothing rushed, nothing casual. He explored me with a patience that felt infinite. He moved like he'd been dreaming of this moment over and over, and now that it was real, he refused to waste a second. My breath caught in my throat. My skin begged for more. Every inch of me woke up underneath him. His name, if he had one, I never asked. What was the point? This wasn't about who we were in daylight. This was the language of our bodies and breath, of sweat and whispers, of two people meeting in a place between worlds. I wrapped my legs around him, and he groaned against my mouth, low and broken, like I had undone something inside of him. We moved together with aching slowness. He filled me like he belonged there. I arched into him, moaned into his shoulder, clutched at his back like I could hold him forever in this moment. It was more than sex. It was recognition. It was home. And when we shattered, together. It felt like the universe had folded in on itself, like everything that had ever been missing from me had come back in one breathless, blinding, beautiful instant. We stayed tangled together afterwards, skin slick, breath ragged, my fingers tracing lazy shapes on his chest. He kissed the top of my head. I closed my eyes, trying to remember every detail of this impossible man, because something inside me already knew he would not be there when the sun rose. The first thing I noticed was the quiet, the kind that presses against your skin and makes your heart race even before you open your eyes. It wasn't the soft stillness of dawn, it was absence, a hush too complete. I reached across the rug, still tangled in a blanket that hadn't been there when we first started. My hand met only empty space, cool fibers, no warmth, no body. I sat up fast, the ache in my thighs a sudden reminder that last night hadn't been imagined. My hair was tangled. My skin still carried the scent of him, smoke and sweat and summer air. But the man who had made love to me like he'd been waiting his whole life was gone. I stood, pulling the blanket tighter around me. The front door was cracked. I stepped outside, barefoot on the porch, squinting into the pink-tinged fog rising from the lake. No one, not on the dock, not by the trees, not even footprints in the dew-damp grass. Only the soft hush of water against the shore. Only the chirp of waking birds and the buzz of a single persistent dragonfly. I turned in slow circles, scanning the horizon, waiting for him to emerge from the woods, dripping from a morning swim, smiling that same knowing smile. But he didn't come. I waited all morning. I dressed, I brewed coffee I never drank. I sat on the edge of the dock until the sun was high overhead and the air turned heavy with July heat. Still nothing. By noon, I'd begun to convince myself that it all had been a dream, that maybe I'd fallen asleep on the rug alone, too deep into my own fantasy, too lonely to know the difference. But then I found the shirt, crumpled by the hearth, dark green, still carrying the shape of his body and the scent of his skin. And in that moment, I knew it had happened. He had been real. But he was gone now. Like the fireflies that vanish by morning, like the last page of a story you aren't ready to finish. And the worst part wasn't the ache between my legs or the silence in the house. It was the certainty in my chest that he wasn't coming back. Not next summer, not ever. He had been mine for one night, one perfect, impossible, unforgettable night. And now he was a ghost again. I didn't leave the lake house for 3 days. Not because I thought he might return. I knew he wouldn't. But I couldn't bring myself to step away from the place where it happened. From the air still thick with his memory, the sheets still carrying the imprint of our bodies. Grief, I realized, doesn't need years to bloom. It just needs depth. And whatever passed between us that night, it went down to my bones. I wore his shirt all 3 days. Not because it comforted me, but because it hurt. The ache kept him close. I wanted the pain sharp and present because it reminded me I hadn't imagined him. It was loose on my body, soft from age and frayed at the cuffs. When I pulled it over my skin, I could still feel the way his hands had once moved there, slow and reverent and hungry. The fabric clung to me like memory. I didn't cry, not at first. I walked, I swam, I lit the fireplace one night, even though it was too hot for it. I made dinner for two and only ate half. I poured wine and left the second glass untouched, staring at it like a question I couldn't answer. And then, the third night, it happened. I woke up at 2:37 a.m., sheets twisted around my legs and my skin flushed and damp. I had been dreaming, not of him, but of the absence of him, of the place where he should have been beside me, the hollow weight of no one. I climbed out of bed and went outside. The stars were endless and the lake still and reflective, like it too was holding its breath. I stood at the edge of the dock in a shirt, bare-legged, chilled by the night air, and I whispered, "Why did you leave?" Nothing answered but the soft call of a loon far across the water. I sank down to my knees in the cool wood beneath me. I cried. For the first time. Not delicate tears, not cinematic sadness. I sobbed, gut deep and ugly, silent except for the shaking of my breath. The kind of crying you don't do for just anyone. The kind that feels like you're breaking apart. Because I wasn't mourning a boyfriend or a lost love. I was mourning a truth that could never live in daylight. That there is a person in this world, this dimension, or some fold beside it, who is the other half of me. And I only got him for one night. When the crying passed, I stayed there, watching the sky lighten and the stars fade. And for a moment, just the smallest blink of time, I swore I felt him. Not saw, not heard, felt. A warmth behind me, like an arm reaching for my waist. A breath at my ear. A whisper I couldn't understand, except for the pulse it left in my chest. And then it was gone. But I smiled just a little, because now I knew something for sure. Even if he never came again, he had been real. And that was enough to change everything. I left the lake house on a Wednesday. The sky was too blue, too bright, birds too cheerful. The dock felt like a lie under my feet. Just wood and nails, nothing more. I didn't pack much, just tossed everything into the back of my car in a slow, distracted haze. I left the wine glasses unwashed, his shirt folded and sat on the edge of the bed like a relic. I almost took it with me. Almost. But some part of me believed that if I left it there, just that he might come back for it. Or someone might. Maybe the lake itself would carry it back to him, the way it carried dreams through water and time. The tires crunched down the gravel driveway, and I didn't look back. Back in the city, everything felt wrong. The buildings were too tall and the voices too sharp. Everything rushed, and I had to remind myself how to be a person again. Coffee lines and inboxes and small talk with people who had no idea I was no longer the same woman. They didn't know I had come undone beneath the hands of a man who may never have existed beyond one perfect night. I felt like I was watching my life through glass. Some things tasted different. I craved salt on my tongue and smoke in the air. I missed the sound of fireflies. I missed him, not just his touch, but the feeling of knowing someone on a soul deep level without needing explanation. I started writing again. At first, just scraps of memory, the way his thumb traced circles on my hip, the way his mouth hesitated at my collarbone like he was asking permission, the way his voice wrapped around my name like it belonged to him. Then came the stories, pages and pages. Not quite fiction, not quite truth, just a dream written backward, one heartbeat at a time. I stopped dating. How could I sit across from someone and pretend to care about their favorite movie when I had once felt a man make love to me like he had waited through lifetimes to do it? Nothing compared. Nothing would. And yet, I wasn't sad. Not exactly. There was a sweetness to it, a warmth beneath the ache. I had been given something most people will never get, a glimpse of a love that was pure, unfiltered, untouched by time or consequence. Yes, it was fleeting. Yes, it left me hollow and breathless. But it also left me full of knowing, of fire, of proof. He was real. Even if no one believed me, even if I never saw him again, the water had touched me and it had left me marked. 5 summers passed. Life stretched on as it always does. I changed jobs, changed apartments, watched friends fall in and out of love, went to weddings I didn't believe in, held babies that didn't belong to me, smiled politely at men who would never understand the part of me that had already been claimed by something they could not see. I didn't talk about him, not once, not with friends, not in therapy, not even with myself, not really. He lived in the quiet space behind my ribs, tucked between my heartbeat and my breath. I visited him in dreams sometimes, but even those faded like fog when I opened my eyes. Still, I never went back to the lake until this year. I didn't plan it, I just went. It was early August. The sun was heavy and golden. The roads curled in on themselves the way I remembered. Muscle memory, a silent pull. The air grew thicker with pine the closer I got, and the moment the lake came into view, glittering and slow, I felt something shift in my chest. The house was still there waiting, weathered but standing. I unlocked the door with the key I never threw away and stepped inside like no time had passed. Dust and lavender and wood, that same soft hush of stillness. I dropped my bag by the stairs and walked into the bedroom. And there it was, his shirt, still folded on the edge of the bed. I don't know why that broke me. Maybe because I thought it would be gone, or maybe because I thought I had made it all up. But there it was, faded and frayed, smelling faintly of salt and something that might have once been smoke. I pressed it to my chest and laid down on the bed fully clothed, still and quiet. And that night I dreamed, not of him, but of the dock. I stood on it in the dark, the lake flat as glass, the stars whispering stories above me. The air shimmered like something was about to break through. I waited, breathless, but no one came. And yet, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a promise. When I woke, the early light was just beginning to stroke the windows. My arms were wrapped around his shirt, my chest was warm. And I realized he might never return in flesh and bone, but he was always there. In the scent of summer air, in the hush before sunrise, in the ache between my thighs when I closed my eyes and I remembered. The one I will never know, but always felt. Sometimes when I'm alone, truly alone, when the world has gone quiet, I can feel him. Not like a ghost, not like a wound, like heat, like a tide rising through my blood. It happens in the moments I least expect, when I'm standing beneath a too hot shower, or when a breeze catches me just the right way through an open window. My breath stutters, my knees weaken, my skin remembers him before my mind does. There's one memory that returns the strongest. It was late, maybe past midnight. The fire had gone cold, but our bodies hadn't. We'd drifted apart for just a moment, his hand tucked underneath his head, mine sprawled across his stomach. The night was thick with the sound of crickets and our own breathing. And then slowly, he rolled onto his side, eyes heavy with want and worship. Again, he murmured, voice barely a rumble. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a command. It was devotion. I straddled him, the blanket slipping from my shoulders, the heat between us reigniting in an instant. His hands gripped my hips like he needed to remember the shape of me, like this moment had lived in him, too, for as long as he'd been waiting. And I moved, slowly at first, long, deliberate rolls of my hips, in every motion a ceremony. He watched me with something like reverence, his hands trembling slightly as they roamed my thighs, my waist, my breast. The way he looked at me, like I was light itself, made me ache, not from need, from depth. I leaned down and kissed him, long and deep, our tongues moving in rhythm with the slow grind of our bodies. His moan vibrated into my mouth, into my chest, and I swallowed it like truth. We didn't rush, we didn't break. We rose and fell like breath, like tide against sand. And when I finally came, arching and shuddering and crying out into the dark, he followed a heartbeat later, his body tightening beneath mine, his mouth at my neck, whispering a name I didn't catch. Maybe mine, maybe not. But it felt like it belonged to both of us. We collapsed into each other, our skin slick, hearts racing, breath sinking again like it had done forever. There was no shame, no space, just the pure pulsing afterglow of having known someone completely. That moment lives in my skin, still. No one has touched me like that since. Not because they couldn't, but because I never opened the door wide enough to let them try. I don't know if I ever will. Because once your soul has been seen like that, held like that, everything else feels like a dim reflection. And I don't regret it, not a second of it, not even the ache it left behind. Because for one night, I got to be fully known, fully loved by someone who may have only existed for that single sliver of time. And somehow, that one moment, it was enough. They say the people who change you the most aren't always the ones who stay. Sometimes they're comets, burning bright and burning fast, leaving a mark so deep you'll feel it every time you close your eyes. He was my fire, and though he vanished like smoke, he left his heat in me. It's in the way I speak now, slower and more deliberate, in how I listen for silence between conversations, how I notice light bending through the trees. I laugh easier, cry harder, crave things I used to fear. I learned that intensity isn't something you run from. It's something to savor, to stretch open for. Not everyone gets that. Most people live cautiously. They hold their hearts with 2 hands and tuck them behind ribs padded with fear. But me, I let mine beat exposed. Let it ache. Let it bloom. He taught me that. He taught me how to feel without apologizing, how to want without shame, how to love without need. He may have only been real for one single night, but he made everything else after feel more honest, like my soul had been tuned into a new frequency, one that recognizes depth when it walks into the room, even if it doesn't stay. I never chased that kind of connection again. I didn't need to, because I had tasted it fully. Once was enough when it's that real. And sometimes, late at night, I think about her, the next woman, because I don't believe he only found me. I believe he finds the ones who need him, just once, so they can remember what it means to be truly seen. So if you ever dream of him, if you wake up with a name you never learned stuck in your throat, a scent on your skin that doesn't belong to anyone you know, don't run from it. Lean into it. If he appears, don't ask why, don't ask how. Just stay. Just feel. Just burn. Because it's real. Even if it only lasts one summer. Even if he disappears with the last firefly of the season. Even if you'll never be the same again. I am older now. The mirror has softened me in places, sharpened me in others. My hair is mostly silver. My laugh lines run deep, but the lake's familiar grooves carved by years of weather and want. But my heart, it still remembers him. I came back to the lake house for the first time in almost a decade, alone, no husband, no children. I never craved those things the way others did. I think some part of me always knew. I had already lived the story I was meant to live. It just happened all in one night. The house is quieter than ever. The floors creak more, the trees lean closer, but the air still smells the same. Pine, water, memory. I walked down to the dock tonight with a glass of wine and sat exactly where I first saw him. The same worn boards, the same hush of water, the stars just beginning to whisper overhead. And then, one flicker, a firefly, just one. It hovered in front of me like a secret, slow, bright, almost glowing gold. And I smiled, not because I expected him to appear. I didn't, not anymore. But because that light, that tiny burning spark, was enough. I raised my glass. To you, I whispered. To the man who taught me that love doesn't have to last forever to be real. To the night that burned through time. To the part of me that still glows in the dark because he touched it once. The firefly blinked out and I was alone again. But not empty. Never empty. Because some loves don't stay. They mark. And I will carry his imprint until the last breath leaves my lungs. Until I, too, become a whisper on the wind.